Sure. So I am, as we've said, Evan. I am on the data science team here at Caliber Mind. My role is I've been doing this role in various companies for many, many years, including the last 4 years now at Caliber Mind, is designing data models, building data, organizing data, doing everything we can to prepare ourselves for the next part, which is analyzing, interpreting the data, and using it to make good decisions. Um, I've been a part of lots of complex analyses, from more simple regressions to Markov analyses to including media mix modeling. We're also talking with quite a number of our customers and prospects have been asking us about marketing mix modeling, and that often falls to me to speak to it. So I've been around it for a very long time now, relatively speaking, and I have some thoughts on it, and I'm here to share those thoughts.
Oh, I bet
And
you
despite
will.
what, yeah,
I bet
despite
you
what
will.
Mary said, we're trying to keep the hot takes to a minimum here.
I
Not
love
none.
that. So take us through it.
All right. So the first thing is that what we've seen is it media mix modeling or marketing mix modeling? What we've seen that is people tend to use them interchangeably. And for the most part, that's okay. Now, if you dig deeper into that, what you're going to find is that there is some subtle differentiation that most people will accept is marketing mix modeling. It focuses on higher level. It's the 30,000-foot view. It's all of my marketing investment across all channels, and it's trying to figure out what is the correct distribution of how I spend my money. Do I put X percent in outdoor, X percent in digital, X percent in somewhere else, et cetera, et cetera. Media mix modeling is sort of this newer term that we've seen come out, and it largely is focused on paid digital channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google Ads. If we get even newer than that, you've got Reddit, you've got all sorts of other platforms, programmatic we can throw in there too. At its core, the math behind them from a theoretical standpoint is more or less the same. Algorithms vary different from even MMM from package to package. So depending on what vendor you're using to help you, the algorithm is different, but conceptually they're effectively the same. So you can more or less use them interchangeably, but they are technically, most people would argue, different. So that's going to bring on to, is MMM the new it? We've been, as I mentioned, we've had a lot of our customers ask us about MMM. We've seen a lot of people talking about it. And so it's just kind of hot right now, which is why I was asked to come on here and sort of talk about it. And, we pulled this example from a LinkedIn influencer. And if you actually look, now my suggestion, use last click attribution. Sorry about that. How did you hear about us? Ask us and actually listen. Well, so we've got attribution. You've got let's ask them. I'm not going to go into why I think that is not useful. Do marketing mix modeling if you have the budget and reach. So there's our hard button topic. And then accept and trust that these things, branding matters even if you can't measure it. Well, I don't love these suggestions, honestly, because it's saying, let's do everything. Let's use attribution. Let's just ask people. Let's do MMM. Let's assume nothing works and just kind of pray. And it's kind of like when you stand for everything, you stand for nothing.
But this conversation proliferates on LinkedIn. Everybody
Yeah.
tells you that whenever leadership questions you as a marketer, just tell them they don't understand anything and it's the brand play before anything else. And I just imagine myself in that room where I'm the one delivering the hard truth, saying, no, just look at the brand. That's what we're here to do. And the follow-up would be like, what did you do with all the money that we gave you? You're just saying brand, that something will happen in the future. And I feel like there's some of that in here. And that's why, that caught my eye, because of course there's 500 clicks, 1,000 comments, and, even more impressions, whatever that is. But I feel like that notion proliferates where they're saying, forget everything that you were taught in grade school in inverted commas, right? And just do this new thing, marketing mix modeling, because that's where you will get the answers to all the questions you're asking for. And now you got a ton of slides to show that it's a little bit more complex than that.
Yeah, and before we even go that further, I want to pick up on, you said do this new thing. MMM is actually not new. I actually have a few slides on here that's talking very briefly about the history of MMM. And normally I'm not a fan of these. Here's this history. But in this case, I think it's important. History is going to give a lot of context. And that context is really important into understanding, in my opinion, how MMM works and how we can potentially use it. So without delaying it, here is a quick, brief history of MMM, because once again, I think it's important. So if we look back sort of as far as we can go back, the early days in the 1950s, you have this 4 P's of marketing framework. Anyone who's taken a marketing class, let's see if they remember them. I believe it's product, price, promotion, and oh gosh, I can never get that last one. Place, thank you. Yeah, where is it going to be? So this evolved in the 50s, in the 60s, as a general framework. And, you know, at the same time, you've got Mad Men era. Let's write a jingle. Let's create a mascot, and let's just blast it everywhere, and let's hope it works. And that was fine at first, but over time, it became, all these companies being asked, why are we spending all this money? What is it getting for us? And now we're going to jump ahead to the 70s, and specifically, I'm going to focus in on 1973. And that's oddly specific, but one thing in particular happens that causes some pretty significant change in the US. And specifically in 1973, you have a pretty rough recession, and you have an oil shock that sends prices through the roof, causes gas shortages. Now, you might be saying, what does that have to do with this? Well, that leads to 2 key things that we start to see in the business world. One, you've got companies that look to cut costs. And the way they do that is they start to adopt what's called just-in-time manufacturing and channel management. And so here I am talking about supply chain and a marketing podcast, which is weird, but trust me, it'll come full circle. So for anyone who doesn't know, just-in-time manufacturing is this concept. It was pioneered, I believe, largely by Toyota and other Japanese companies. But it's this concept of, we're going to save on costs by minimizing how much inventory we carry. And we're going to make sure we have as much inventory as we need to deliver at that moment in time and no more. Because if I'm Kimberly-Clark, it costs a lot of money to produce a warehouse full of paper towels and toilet paper and then sit on it for months. And that's money I could be using to do other things. So there's this holding cost, and just-in-time was a way to reduce that holding cost and save money. Because once again, we've got this recession. Additionally, you've got companies looking for other ways to save money. Marketing budgets are often first on the chopping block. And so they're going to these, you're spending millions of dollars on TV, on radio, on billboards, on all of these things. Justify that spend. How do I know I'm not wasting that spend? How do I know I'm not going to get those sales anyways? And what came out of both of these was the early MMM algorithms, which is in the context of just-in-time inventory management. It was, I need to know, if I do X, what is that going to do to inventory and demand so I can plan for it? So essentially what we got was a more evolved forecasting model that can be used to predict, based on my past, how this promotion is going to affect my need for inventory. And that's really important, because the cost of stocking out and not being able to sell anything because you ran too lean is probably definitely worse than the cost of carrying too much inventory. So it evolved from that. And on top of that, you've got these marketing companies that you've got marketing organizations that need to justify all of this spend that they're doing. How do we do that? Well, let's look at some basic algorithms, and how can we figure out, if we spend this mix 1 month and then another month we changed it, how does that affect sales? So the key here is that a lot of this was done in the context of CPG. It's stuff that someone's going to buy. You're going to buy your cereal. You're going to buy your toilet paper. You're going to consume it, and then you're going to buy more. So these are high volume, just high volume. We're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars of sales, and they needed a way to help justify their millions of dollars in spend. So that's the 70s. Now, if we flash forward again, we're going to jump to the 90s and the 2000s. And what you have essentially is you've obviously got the internet come on, but you've also got this, excuse me, you've also got this, the cost of computing resources in particular, just crashing. So all of a sudden, it becomes much more affordable to do some of these complex things that previously might require a whole mainframe, or you have to do it by hand. And you can count the number of people on your fingers in the world who can do these stuff. So all of a sudden, in the 90s and the 2000s, it becomes more accessible. The models become more advanced because the computing power of the day can actually handle it. So that gets us to today. And so why the hype now? I would argue that there are several key things going on all at once. Is you've got privacy laws, you've got user activity tracking and limitations, GDPR, the California Privacy Act. You've got other states in the U.S. implementing things. You've got other countries. It's kind of a mess, and it's making it harder to track, as well as once users are getting more technical savvy. I mean, I've got ad blockers, cookie blockers on my browsing. That's normal. It just becomes harder to track these things. We've got maybe potentially in this, are we in a recession? No, but there's certainly more pressure now than there were 5 years ago on marketing budgets. And you've got this perpetual, on top of that, you've got more and more data coming in. It's still siloed, it's still disconnected, and it's still messy. And you've got all these companies that claim they want to be a data-driven culture. And MMM is this new shiny thing. And it's kind of as simple. It's honestly, it's all these things, and this is shiny and new, and it's an alternative. And it actually, as I'll explain later, it can really overcome some of these issues like privacy laws. You just don't need to worry about it so much. So
the advent of the e-commerce and like this digital culture with people buying everything online, like I forgot when I went into a brick and mortar store to buy clothing, and probably there's millions of me's, and companies have to figure it out the size of e-commerce that we have today compared to before.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing is like the data becomes more trackable. It's just it's like I said, it just seems like it feels like it's a natural evolution. And also, if we jump onto that, where I can pinpoint a spot in this year where we started hearing about it from our customers a lot more, and I think it corresponds to the release of Google's Meridian, which really feels like an endorsement of the methodology. Right or wrong, Google has a team of PhDs, mathematicians who built this out. And they built it out because they published white papers, right? This is independent. This isn't we're going to do something complex to try and trick you into spending more money. They built it. They hired these people to build it because they believe if they build something genuine, it's going to show that their market investing with them is worthwhile.
And you're going to show us the output for that today.
Yes, I'm actually going to show off and highlight some of that, the Meridian results. The other nice thing is they packaged it very, very nicely. All right. So before we actually go into that, it's important. We need to ask ourselves, like, what are we trying to do here? What are the goals of MMM? And I kind of distill it into two things. And really, it's more like one thing that kind of offshoots, which is one, understand how changes in spend affect specific outcomes. So we circle back to our channel management. How does a change in a promotion, a change in pricing, a change in marketing investment, how is that going to affect my demand? Or if we want to say, let's look in the context of our purely marketing, if I reallocate my budget, how is that going to affect my performance? That's what MMM is really trying to understand in the algorithm. Once you do that, then you get to the next logical, the actionable part is, how do I use this information to reallocate marketing investment dollars? Ultimately, everything comes down to is, can I use this analysis to make a positive business decision that will positively affect my ROI, positively affect my revenue? Personally, I don't like to focus on what the actual numbers are. Oh, I increased my ROI by 50%. I increased revenue by $500 million. Whatever that number is, I'm always advocating focus less on what the actual numbers are and focus more about, is this good or bad? If yes, what do I do next to make it better? If no, try and understand why, and how do I use that to inform my next decision? Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm actually going to show off Meridian as we speak. So Google, as part of this, they put out a nice demo in what's called a Colab notebook that anyone here can go and run. Colab is something that is free. You can connect to a runtime and you can run it and spit out the results. And I'm going to go over some of these results showing Google's sample data. So here we go.
And I think it's their output for the sample, not the Tableau store of sorts, but their sample data set, right?
Yep. So this is what their notebook looks like, that literally anyone can go, and when you run it, it spits out all this stuff. We don't need to worry about it. What I'm just showing you this to show that it's there. And if you want to go find it on your own, this is what it looks like. Now, once you run all of that, you're going to get two outputs in this table. This notebook outputs everything as this nice HTML file that you can then open up in your browser. So I'm just going to go over what you can expect from, say, the Meridian output here. So the first page is a summary output. The summary output is showing you essentially this blue line, which is, you've got three lines here. You've got your baseline. The baseline represents what this model thinks the revenue that you would get if you did nothing. If you cut all of your spend, this is where the model thinks you would be. Then it has this darker blue line, which is the expected. That's what the model projects. Now, it's very hard to see because they used very massaged data. This actual number, in this light blue, you can kind of see it over there. That's the actual numbers. So essentially what it's doing is this model, it does a whole bunch of math, and then it makes predictions based on spend levels. And then this chart is comparing it. This is trying to tell you how good the model is at predicting values. So if we go down here, it's going to give you model fit metrics. I like to focus on the R-squared value in particular. It's not perfect, but it's easy to understand, and it's usually good enough for us, right? We're not running drug trials where we need a level of precision maybe that we just don't need that kind of level of precision here. So R-squared, if you don't know, is a measure from 0 to 1. That is a measure of how good your model is at predicting actual results. And this is showing an R-squared, 1 being the model perfectly predicts it, 0 meaning there's no correlation. It's throw out this model, it's not doing anything. This is showing it's very good at predicting in their sample data. An R-squared of 0.93 is excellent. Anything, once again, if you're doing drug trials, you need correlations much higher than that even. You need 0.95. When people ask me what's a good R-squared, well, it all depends. If you put me sort of in a corner and say something, I need to know something, I like to use for making a business decision 0.7. If you've got 0.7, to me, I feel confident enough that that's enough to make a positive business decision off of. It's not as scientific, but once again, I don't need to be scientific here. So as you scroll down through the results, it's going to show you more sort of summary stuff. This is contribution by revenue channels. It breaks it down by percentage, how much, with yellow being if you do nothing. Here's a pie chart that shows the same thing but differently. It'll also spit out this bar chart. Please do not show senior leadership this bar chart. It's going to confuse them. It is essentially giving you an ROI number and showing here are the numbers of how we back into it. It's messy. Same with this chart right here. This is showing contribution over time by all your channels. It's actually a really useful chart, but don't put it in a presentation. It's messy. It's not good for showing off. Same with this one. A lot of these are what I call sort of are on the border of vanity charts. This is showing you how the ranking of things change over time. This one can actually be interesting. In their sample data, right, we see channel 3 is sort of middle of the pack. It drops down and then it spikes up and then it comes back down to the middle of the pack. So something happened in there. We obviously don't know what. This is sample data. So you can see something from this where you can see changes over time. But once again, I view a lot of these as just largely vanity metrics that that maybe look good. It also spits out to you this chart. This is ROI versus effectiveness. Once again, do not show this chart to anyone if you spit this out, because what is effectiveness? It's not a clear known definition. So from just a general, this is how we display charts, I have to go here to figure out how they define it. But this is another scatter plot that is essentially showing you as ROI grows, what's your effectiveness? Effectiveness is incremental outcome generated per impression, because ROI itself isn't necessarily bad.
Sorry to interrupt. Question.
Yeah.
If we're looking at all these different channels shown up or down, is it showing the interplay effect across all channels, or does it look at each channel individually without kind of considering what other channels are doing?
It does. It's both. It looks at interplay across all channels. So the backend data coming into this analysis is weekly data on a per channel level, and it also goes to the geo level as well. So it's looking within each geo region, how does each channel's different variations in channel spend affect the overall performance? And so because it's looking at how variations affect the overall, it is the interplay of all of them put together.
So if, like any marketing team, you go ahead and you kill a channel for whatever reason, all of your output may change. Again, given the time and how long it takes for all of it to recalculate.
Yep, absolutely. If you kill a channel entirely, that's going to change everything. And the model is going to attempt to compensate for that when it builds itself, but ultimately it will change the analysis. So there's some more charts that it gives you out, some whisker charts here. Once again, don't show these to people because they're not quick and easy to understand. What's more interesting, more of a vanity chart that it can spit you out, but this is actually a good one, is this is the response curve by marketing. And so what this is charting is, as spend increases, what is your incremental revenue? And this is one of the core questions that we want to ask ourselves, that what MMM can try and tell you is, how much can I expect to get out of the next dollar spent? And so this model can construct curves. If you spend this much, here's what you can expect to get. If you spend a little bit more, here's what you can expect to get. So this is just a summary. This is the high level. The other page is far more interesting from my perspective, that it's going to spit out. And once again, this is just the pretty version that it's going to share with that it gives you. All of this can be available to chart however you want. So this is what the other tab looks like. And this is its optimization report. This is what I really want to know. It's how do I make that next best decision? And so I'm going to scroll down here. Here's some hero metrics. It thinks you should leave your budget where it is for the sample data, but it thinks through small changes in spend, reallocating spend from channel 1 to 3, whatever, you can get an additional $6 million in incremental revenue. And so that's it's not a huge amount in the scheme of things, but it's still a big number. And imagine this is 260 million. Imagine if we're talking about $1 billion, and I can not spend any more or less, and I can manufacture, another $25 million. That's not chump change. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'd call that a win if I can take the exact same spend and drive an extra 25 million. So what's more interesting is it tells you how it thinks you should do that, right? So in the sample data, after running the analysis, the model thinks channel 3 dropped the spend by $26 million. Channel 1 dropped the spend by $3.5 million. Channel 4 increase it by 14, et cetera, et cetera. So it's literally going to tell you exactly how it thinks, how much money you should be spending at each level. So you've got a pie chart showing this new breakdown. You've got a waterfall chart showing the exact same breakdown and how you're going to get to this new incremental revenue. And perhaps the coolest, most valuable charts are these ones. So these are response curves individually, and the screen's not quite wide enough right now. Let's make it, see if we can get it better. There we go. So on each chart, it's going to show you sort of your non-optimized spend and your optimized spend. Your non-optimized spend on these charts is where you are, and the optimized spend is where the model thinks you should be. So if we look at channel 0 here, non-optimized spend is at 40 million. the optimal level to sort of and if you look, here's channel spend. And so these are some of the more pretty ready to go outcomes. But that's really the key of why this is so potentially powerful, why people are interested. And it's trying to tell you how you should be spending your current money. And then additionally, it can tell you where the model can tell you where it thinks to best spend your next dollar. And once again, that's what I like focusing on. Money I spent last month is gone. It's a sunk cost. Money I spend this month, most of it at this point, sunk cost. But where do I spend that next dollar tomorrow? That is not a sunk cost. And so this MMM analysis will hopefully guide me of saying, spend it here. This is where you can maximize that dollar. Or it can potentially say you're overspending and you need to cut back spend. I know as a marketer, most people don't like hearing that, but sometimes spending less is the way to go. And this should intuitively all make sense. We all understand, hopefully, the concept of diminishing returns, right? As I increase investment into one channel, I expect ROI to increase. At some point, I hit a saturation level where I can pump all the money in the world in, and my revenue, my conversions, they're not going up. That channel is fully tapped. What this model is trying to do essentially is figure out that point, not when you're fully tapped out, but where the dollar you put in is not worth what you're going to get out of it. Because maybe that next dollar in is you're only getting 85 cents out instead of $1.05 in.
So Evan, a question for you. How does the model within MMM react to market changes or condition changes? Because I remember from the stats class, every time we would write the hypothesis outcome, you would always put all other variables remaining the same, right? AI comes in and out of a sudden your channels that you got the data from last year, whatever, are totally performing out of whack. How does it compensate for that market conditions change, if at all?
So the reality is, like every other model, it can only handle the data that you input it. Now, some of these models are very advanced and they can handle, the Meridian model can handle seasonality. The Meridian model can even handle, if you can somehow get your hands on your competitors' spend data, it can handle that. And so the answer is, if the data doesn't get into the model, it gets ignored because the model can't see it, the algorithms can't optimize to it. And that's not a draw. I would argue that's not a drawback to MMM. That's a drawback to any statistical modeling we try and do. If we can't measure it, if we can't see it, we can't adjust for it. Most things, if we can put it into the model will account for it.
Thank you. Shall we get back to what's good and what's bad about MMM?
Yeah. So I've gone over the example. Hopefully this should be pretty intuitive for everyone at this point. If you've been listening, and I've been doing a good job. But why it's great is, one, it requires relatively few easy to obtain variables. You effectively need spend by channel. Really, you need about 5 channels minimum. Otherwise, the variance it struggles with fewer than that. And you need sales or revenue numbers, which should also be easily known. That's it. It can run with as little as essentially 6 columns of data. The more is better, but you also need to be careful because you can overload these models. And if you overload it, it will still run and it will spit you out data, but it basically is trying to outthink itself. There's too much going on and you might not get good results out. And the other thing which I've really tried to hammer is it offers spend optimization channels or recommendations by channel. And if geodata is supplied, it can also provide some models will also allow for regional spend optimizations as well. So it's just, and when this goes back to, it's harder to track people. Well, I don't have to track people anymore. It's just, so in some ways it's easier, which is why it's great. However, it's not all sunshine and roses.
So you said just 6 columns of data. I feel like I might have 6 columns. I might find them somewhere. My question is, how long should those columns be?
Uh, Realistically, it's best to have about 2 years worth of data. Most of the models that we've looked at prefer weekly data, but you can run it on monthly data or even quarterly data. You just need more rows. So if each week represents a row of data, and we say 2 years of weekly data, we're talking about 100 rows of data spread out. So I need weekly data for 5 channels, plus a sales and revenue number. I can feed in more than that if we have it, but 2 years is really a good number to aim for. More is great, but you also want to be careful, because if you go back, say, 10 years, the things we did 10 years ago are probably not relevant in any way to what we've done in the last 2 years. So why would we allow the model to account for those?
So essentially, if you're talking, you need 100 rows of data, and there is the sales transactions piece. You would expect for the sales or the revenue numbers to change, I guess, somewhat significantly enough from week to week, meaning you're closing a lot of deals, meaning the 6 to 12 month sales cycles might not be your friend to see that change from week to week.
Yeah, which is thanks for teeing up that softball for me. So let's talk about some of the challenges with MMM and why it maybe isn't great for B2B. As I mentioned way back in the history, this was all built initially to handle large data volumes for B2C essentially. Now, the math doesn't change for doing it for B2B, but B2B has its own unique challenges. So some of the challenges that we've seen is, one, it's a black box. The math behind the hood of Meridian, of MMM, is complicated. I'm not going to explain it. It would take a semester class to explain this. So this is a black box, good or bad. It's a black box. We've had some people. What I've seen in my interactions with customers is some people hate the black box and they want to strip anything they can't understand out, which is great. Or some people, they're okay with the black box. They don't care. They just want the numbers. It's all about the level of trust that you're willing to put in. And there's no wrong answer here, whether or not this is good or bad. Additionally, different models use unique algorithms. So I can take my data, I can run it into Meridian, I can take it into PyMC, I can run it there. I can take it to a vendor that's the same data to a vendor that is doing this as well, and I'll get 3 different results, guaranteed. Additionally, to truly evaluate the output, it requires some advanced, like all models, it requires some advanced statistical knowledge. We can look at the R value, and that's something simple, and that's why I like to go to the R squared value in particular. Because you don't need to know how it works. All you need to know, it's a measure of how good the model is at predicting. And here's the measurement from 0 to 1. I like to use 0.7 as my threshold in the marketing decision making world. So that's one potential issue. The biggest issue that most of our customers are going to see is you need about 2 years of data. You can do it with less, but it's all about quality of data and amount coming in. And additionally, your data needs to be smooth, which is a fancy way of saying you need a lot of data. So if I'm an organization that maybe does 50 sales a week, 100 sales a month, let's stick with 100 sales a month. And then 1 month, I have a great month, blowout month. I do 200 sales in a month. That's a 100% increase. The following month, I have a bad month and I do only 50. And so that's a 50% drop from my normal 100. That creates all these peaks and troughs in the data, and that makes it creates noise is the term that you'll hear math people say. That noise is, the model has to account for it, but that noise is essentially saying, I like to think of it as, can randomness explain the variation? And the idea is no, we don't want random chance to be able to explain it. And the best way to do that is to what's called smooth the data, get rid of those peaks and troughs. And the best way to do that is with more data. So if you're doing 100 sales a month, 100 sales a week, 100 sales a week, you might be good. If you're doing 100 a month, MMM is on sales data is probably not right for you, because ultimately you're going to get not enough or bad data coming in, and bad data in is bad data out. That's just kind of a fact. The other issue with needing lots of data is it creates this longer feedback loop. So if you're B2B, if you've got an 18-month sales cycle and I run my MMM, great. It says, make this change. Okay, I've made this change. I might have to wait 18 months to truly see if that change did anything. And waiting 18 months isn't necessarily helpful. In fact, I'll go a step farther. Waiting 18 months for most of us is probably problematic. Nadia, if you went to your boss and said, oh, I did this awesome thing, we think it's good, but we'll know in 18 months, what would the reaction be?
Well, we use this line on the website: marketing lives and dies by the quarter, because your QBR is a quarterly, right? And somebody was talking about kind of the sentiment similar to that LinkedIn post that we shared, or, you should teach people what marketing does, right? And I'm thinking, how many QBRs can I show up at and say the same thing and tell the same story without any meaningful change? And these people continuing to believe me, keep giving me money and keeping the marketing department lights on. So 18 months, that was my previous life. 18 to 24 months was the sales cycle, right? It's challenging. But I think when you say sales, in marketing, we can relate that to like opening new opportunities. So new opportunities open, and maybe we could layer that to opportunities closed and use that as yet another variable, right?
Yep. And so we'll get into sort of how we can shorten that feedback loop later. So once again, most people want to look at revenue. With a longer sales cycle, you can't always do that. That's going to be a problem that's not exclusive to MMM, but it's somewhat more prominent in MMM because it looks at a long history of past. And so if I make one change for 1 month, I have 1 month of data that I can then feed back into that model. And that doesn't carry as much weight as the prior 24 months before. So it's a little bit harder, but there are strategies that we can take around that, which I'll get into in just a little bit. Finally, the other reason why it's maybe not great is it's very generalized. As I mentioned, there's no granularity. It will not make specific predictions about any accounts or group of accounts. It won't specify that at all. It's largely trends. It's focused at a high level at the channel spending. It's if I increase channel 5 by 30%, what can I expect to get? Not can I expect to close more SMB customers. It's message agnostic for the most part, and that can be a challenge too, especially when it's I need to focus on my marketing segment that I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for SMB. I'm responsible for EMEA. It's not necessarily the best for that either because it's giving you that high level. So I've said why it's good. I've said why maybe it's not so great. But there are ways that we can use this. And now I'm going to sort of tackle this. And so basically how we would use this is clean and organize the marketing investment data. We sort of touched on this. Minimum about 5 channels is generally what you need. More is better. Fewer is sometimes problematic. Depending on the model you're running, add in your other variables. Seasonality is generally a pretty common one if you have seasonality. And then run the analysis. Ultimately, I briefly showed that notebook that Google created. It loads the data and then it does everything in there. And that's kind of it. Now, to be fair, cleaning and organizing data is often hard. It's a little bit easier with MMM because we're looking at a high level. So generally, that data should be very accessible. Let's move on. Okay. So as we've mentioned, and I'm sure everyone knows, this requires a lot of data. And a lot of us in the B2B space don't have it. The number I like to use, as this is safe, is 100 conversion actions per week. And so, but what if I don't have 100 sales per week? That's okay. What I would advocate is looking at what I call micro conversions. A micro conversion is essentially a higher level action that is a good leading indicator to a sales. So if we can't do closed won deals, can we look at, or the sales cycle is too long, can we look at ops created? Are we creating 1,000 ops per week? If the answer is no, that's okay. Let's not panic. Let's just go further up the funnel. The funnel. Can we look at demo requests? Do we have enough of that? What about general form fills? If we're still really set on this, but we still don't have enough, we can even go up as high as web traffic, right? If I want form fills and demo requests coming through web, can I look at web traffic and see how the different, can I run the analysis on that? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. Now you get further away from your ultimate goal, so your model becomes maybe a little less reliable, but the bottom line is you can still run it. So most people, I would hope, if you're listening to this, you're at an organization where you can at least say, yeah, I can handle 1,000 conversion actions per week. If you can't, you can still run it. Your model becomes less reliable, less good, less trustworthy. And once again, it's everything. We need to be able to track it over time. That's a big part of MMM. It's how do things change over time as different inputs change. All right. So let's assume you found that level. Let's say it's ops created that you need. You put all your data and you run it. The next steps are the very first step you should do, no matter if it's MMM, if you're using multi-touch attribution, if you're using anything, check the numbers, look at them, and ask yourself, do these make sense? So many times too many times you'll run an analysis, the numbers don't make sense. They're not believable. And then keep in mind, these are models. They're basically complex math equations. They don't think, they don't interpret. There's no, oh, this makes no sense, let's try something else. This is just, it's a program, it does what it's told. Sometimes the math doesn't work for whatever reason, or sometimes there's a bad input that doesn't throw an error, and so it still runs, but that bad input throws you out of whack. So if your marketing budget is $50 million a year, and your MMM model says to cut that to $0 a year, you've probably done something wrong. Or if it says, you should be spending $250 million a year, that's great, but that's not helpful, right? You're not going to be able to conjure an extra $200 million because this model says you should spend it. So that's the first thing is we need to give our numbers a reality check. And then we need to ask, now what? Is this output, if it seems believable, can I actually use it? Right? Does it say to cut a channel entirely? Well, I don't know if I'm really comfortable doing that. That's a pretty dramatic step. Does it say to cut this channel 15% and increase this channel by 20%? That's something that's actionable. And if I do that, the model can say, we'll hopefully be able to tell you what you can expect from it, and here's the next act, and here's how you take actions from that. And the beautiful thing is, once you do that, you wait some time, you gather more data, you run it again, and you can evaluate, was this a good or bad change? And if so, what do I do next? Which comes down to really the ultimate goal, as I see it from any of this stuff, but MMM in particular, which is how can I create a positive business? How can I make a decision that creates a positive business outcome? If that positive outcome is $1 million of new revenue or $100 million of revenue, yes, that matters, but what's more important is that positive decision. Because one positive decision plus another one, plus another one, plus another one just kind of snowballs. And they're not always going to be positive, and that's okay. But being able to identify, yes, this was good. No, this was not good. And then, hey, MMM model, what do I do next? And so that's all I got.
Oh, sorry, Nadia, I think we can't hear you. It won't let me unmute you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary, saving the day. I was saying this is our third session throughout Hitchhiker's Guide, where we're talking about marketing mix modeling. Mary, remember we had Evan from Foxit who talked about media regression analysis and how he was pulling spend from Google Ads to figure out which campaigns were wasteful. We had Archana head of analytics at US Bank, and she was comparing MTA, MMM, and incrementality. And now, Evan, you gave us more of a deep dive to understand what's happening under the hood. And there's one theme that I hear continuously from all three speakers is that as a marketer, you have to have a lot of patience to get what is meaningful out of this exercise. But the message in the market from the vendors to the likes of me and Mary is that, hey, you only need 4 weeks of data, just buy my thing, and you're going to get like the next best decision that you're going to miss out on. Like, what's your take on that?
If you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn.
That's a tactful way of putting it.
Yeah, no, it's especially in B2B, right? This isn't B2C where I ran an ad and I generated 50,000 clicks, and generally when people click, my sales cycle is an hour, right? We don't see movement that fast. And because you don't see movement that fast, you can't wait that long. You have to wait longer. Now, the exception is if I mentioned micro conversions, right? If you're looking at, am I increasing my web traffic? Well, I can get instant feedback on that. But that alone is going to create problems because it doesn't tell you, am I creating the correct web traffic, right? Because I might need someone on my site 15 times before they'll give me a hand raise. And if I have them 15 times, that's also not 15 times in 48 hours. That might be 15 times over 6 to 8 weeks. And that's before they even hand raise. So if someone says, yeah, I can tell you, I can get results in 4 weeks, they can run a model and they can spit out results, but that's only half of it, right? It's the goal of all of this is to help us govern what we do next. How do we make a better next decision? And it can tell me how to make that decision or guide me towards that, but it can't then tell me if that was a good decision right away. Like, that's just unrealistic. And my flags go up when I hear things like that.
Just say that MTA, MMM, and incrementality are interchangeable, because that's another kind of part of the same message, right? Pick this or that, like we saw that in the post that we kind of opened with. Use either this or that and ditch whatever else you had.
I don't think they're interchangeable. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, though. They do different things. As we mentioned, MMM is really designed to give you a high level. It's a very strategic, this channel, not that channel, this channel down, that channel up. It's a very, very high level. Even if I'm looking at, we differentiate between media and marketing mix. Even if I'm looking at media and I'm looking at my different digital spends, that's still a relatively high level. Where MTA, I think, can fit in, or even not MTA, even single touch if you want to. I'm not here to judge. What it can tell you is at a more granular level, all right, within my Google ads, this campaign, not this campaign, this message, not that message. And MMM, if you try and go to that level of granularity in your MMM model, it's going to choke. The amount of resources is going to, if it even runs at all, the amount of resources are going to blow up, and you're going to get very suspect data. There's this concept of over-optimizing models, and that's essentially what you're going to be doing, because that's not what this was designed for. So right, I think there's very much, I think they work very much side by side. I don't think it's pick one or the other. I think it's pick what's best for you. If you have limited resources, MMM right now is a little bit less accessible, I think, than multi-touch attribution. Maybe don't pick MMM. If you've got the resources to do both and you understand how and when, great, do both. But I don't think it's one or the other. And I don't think you should be asking people, how did you hear about us? Because that's not going to be reliable either. That's going to be less reliable than anything else, to be honest.
Thank you, Evan, so much. I appreciate the take.
Yep.
Mary, back over to you.
Thank you both. All right. Bye-bye. in terms of being on the stage. Sorry, I know we've got one more thing to do, which is a quick teaser of what we got in store for next week. If you're able to join us then, you will see a very exciting session on another sort of hot button LinkedIn prevalent topic, which is agentic AI, which I think a lot of people are talking about. How can they leverage it? Do you build your own? Do you purchase products that have agentic AI baked in? Lots and lots of things swirling around, but ultimately, I think people are still in the information gathering mode. We have a great speaker next week, Siddharth Pawar from Workday. He's the he's the director of marketing analytics over there, and he will join us to talk agentic AI. So hopefully, we will see you all there. Thanks.